It may be too cold to plant any seeds here in Zone 5 outside here at the beginning of March, but it is definitely time to buy your seeds and start a few indoors. Survival Garden Seeds sent me this packet of home garden seed packets. There's 30 different packets in here so that I could review them, and I'm super excited about this. Look at this, is a full garden's worth of seeds. Now you can they even include wildflower seeds to attract pollinators to your garden so you have good success. But with all of these seeds, I should be able to plant an entire garden, and I want you to be able to do that as well. So make sure you click the links in my description box to be able to get your seeds. Today's old house DIY project in this backyard homestead was to replace this old light switch. Kind of dry in here, and I haven't been running a humidifier, I forgot, and it's sparks every time you stand up. There's so much static, and I think I don't know if it was just incidental, but the switch was no good and my light wouldn't come on, so we replaced that and we're all good to go. This is one of my favorite things to have for dinner, and it's not specific to the recipe. It's just that I had a jar of turkey noodle soup that I pressure canned, heated up, and added some Israeli couscous to I maybe boiled it for 15 minutes to cook the couscous. So easy. All I did was dump the jar in the pan, heat it up with the couscous, and now I've got lunch. Last night I made some pizza dough to cook today, and it is another King Arthur flour recipe, and it's called their crispy crust something. It was their recipe of the year a couple years ago, and I finally got around to trying it recently, and it is so good. But the thing is, you have to remember to start the dough the day before. So I did that. I mixed it up, and then you have to fold it and then let it sit in the fridge overnight, at least 12 hours. Now what I need to, and I'm going to be using my home canned pizza sauce that is so good. First thing I need to do this morning, 3 hours before I want to bake this at lunchtime, is get my pan ready and press the crust into the cast iron pan. You can see I've got white residue in mine because I use this for my steaming for my sourdough every other week. And I know that's not good, but we're going to kind of season this. We're going to put a couple of tablespoons of olive oil in here and just spread it around, and that will also kind of clean up some of that basically hard water residue, because the water that I put in here to bake my bread, to steam it, ends up boiling out. That's a lot of oil. So the pan's oiled. Now we need to take this dough, and the dough to me yesterday when I was mixing it up was way too stiff, but there was a point where I really couldn't add any more water to it. So I'm hoping that it's okay, but we're going to press this into the cast iron pan. Not too vigorously, I don't want to tear the dough, but we're just going to get it pressed out to the edges, and then it's probably going to shrink back initially, so we're going to let it sit for 15 minutes, and then we'll press it again to try to get it all the way out to the edges after we do it the initial time. And we may have to do that a couple of times because it's got a little bit of memory. It wants to stretch back. 15 minutes is up. It has shrunk in a little bit, and the other thing that I neglected to do was to coat both sides of the dough with the olive oil, so I'm going to do that now. Get my bottle open in case I need to add more. I think I might just add a little shot more of that. Turn it over, and then press it out some more, kind of making sure I dimple those fat edges and get it spread out once again. in an even as a layer as possible. Kind of going up the sides a little bit. The recipe is called Crispy Cheese Pan Pizza on the King Arthur Flour website. All right, let's give that another 15 minutes now and see if it stays this time. While I wait for that, and it looks like it's gonna stay, I'm gonna have a breakfast burrito that my son and I made last August, and put a bunch of them in the freezer wrapped in wax paper. I nuked it, and I'm going to serve it with some of my home fermented hot sauce from some cayenne peppers that I grew in the garden last year. The second 15 minutes is up and the crust is staying all the way out to the edge and hasn't shrunk up again, so I'm going to cover it with my piece of parchment that I reuse over and over again for sourdough bread baking. Cover it and let it rise for 2 hours while I go ice fishing. Every day for the last week or so, I've been studying for my technician license for the ham radio. I completed all 10 lessons this morning and took 3 practice tests, and it shows that I am ready to take the exam. I have a couple lessons that I want to review a little more, but this is exciting. I'm going to be able to use my handheld ham radio that I got, and I'll include a link for that in the description box. But this course has been wonderful to prepare me for this exam, and I'm excited. Next thing I also bought the course for my son. I got a family discount for the 2 of us to do it, but I got a radio for him, and it'll be his turn to study on his own account as well. And then we will both have a ham radio to communicate. All right, I got a hand auger now, and right away someone else needed to use it, so that's the power of hand-driven tools. You're not worrying about batteries. So let's see if we can catch some fish this time. Bite so far, and it got off. It's really starting to snow heavy. I'll give it a few more minutes and then I'm probably gonna head home. On my way home from fishing at the fish hatchery in town, I saw some bighorn sheep. Unfortunately, when I thought I was hitting the record button, I wasn't, but I managed to get a little snippet so I could at least show you a picture of them. They're pretty cool. Now, we need to get some cheese the majority of our cheese, and I've got, I don't know what that is, 1.5 cups maybe of mozzarella shredded, and then I had a little bit of cheddar left over from our Tex-Mex spaghetti, which is just spaghetti and a can of Hormel chili over it with some cheese. But I'm going to put cheese over the majority of the cheese, like probably 1 cup, on top of this crust. And I'm going to make sure it's all the way out to the edges. That's what makes it crispy, because the cheese kind of seals in the moisture and doesn't let the sauce get it all soggy. And now I've got this beautiful weck jar full of homemade pizza sauce. And to open up a weck jar, you just pull down on the tab, and I'm going to do it on the countertop. pull down on the tab and that releases the seal. We have our beautiful pizza sauce. It's so good. So let's get this spread, and it's a lot of sauce for one pizza, but I'm okay with that. I love saucy pizza. So we're gonna just use the whole jar. Probably would not normally use the whole jar on this size of a pizza, but it'll be so good. By the way, I did not catch any fish ice fishing again, but I had one real good hook, but my line snapped. I don't know if it was a pike that broke the line or what, but I lost the line. Maybe it was on the edge of the ice. And then another decent nibble that felt like a perch, but didn't bring anything home, but it was fun to try. I've got my oven preheating to 450 degrees, very hot. And I've got, according to the recipe, that King Arthur flour recipe, it says one rack at the bottom and the other rack 4 to 5 inches from the top. This is going to go in the oven on that bottom rack for 18 to 20 minutes until the bottom of the crust is golden brown and crispy. And if the top isn't brown enough and bubbling, then we'll move it to the broil position or the very top rack for 2 to 4 minutes to brown that up. Oh Lord, that's heavy. There we go. The timer just went off. Oh, that's beautiful. Let me get it out of the oven and check the bottom of the crust. I'm just trying to pull away the crust from the edge to see how brown it is on the bottom. It's definitely brown on the edge, but that's from the cheese. So I think it needs another minute or two, and then I'll put it on the top rack to brown the cheese some more. The pizza is done. It's beautiful. Now I'm supposed to loosen the edge all the way around so that the cheese doesn't stick as it cools. And then when I get it all separated around the edge, I'm going to move it to this cutting board to let it cool there before I cut it so that it doesn't get all soggy in the pan. Oh my gosh. That came out really easy. Came straight out of the pan, just lifted right out. I'm going to let this cool for a bit. And that is my late lunch, early dinner after freezing my tush off ice fishing. Let's look at how thick and fluffy but crispy this pizza is. So good. You have to try it. King Arthur Flour's crispy cheese pizza in cast iron. Snowy March morning. Today would be a great day to use up what I keep in the freezer. I keep adding my garlic peels, onion peels, vegetable scraps, chicken bones, whatever. I'm going to throw those in the stock pot, cover them with water, add some peppercorns. We're going to make some stock today, and then that'll sit in the fridge tonight, and I will can it tomorrow. Actually, this one's going to be a little weak beef broth. I see a prime rib rack in here. I like to smash it so that it's good and flat and all the way down to the edges so that it stacks neatly in the freezer and thaws easier too. So just give it a good smash. I'm doing it one-handed, but give it a good smash a couple of times. Get it down into those corners and make sure it's flat so they stack and thaw better, and then seal it up. Nice and flat. I'm going to take these down to the deep freeze. One of my favorite snowy day lunches is to have some of my home canned Sloppy Joe mix, just microwaved. I've got some wild forage home canned pears, urban forage, and some store-bought buns. And that's going to be my lunch. For dinner, I'll probably do the same thing, but I'll add a spinach salad. The broth simmered all day. You can see it's mostly onion skins, and that beef bones, the beef bones that were in there were pretty fatty, so I am going to have to refrigerate this overnight and remove the fat cap in the morning and then can it tomorrow. But I got most of the solids out, but there's some left in there. I'm going to run it through, just spoon it into this nut bag and filter out. Oops, I got to use 2 hands, but I'm going to filter it through there to get the rest of the solids out. That got a little bit more out. So this is going to go in the fridge overnight to cool. I'll wash the big pan so that I can reheat it in the morning and get it canned up. And this stuff, I'm not going to save any of it. And my composting worms don't like onions, so that is the final waste product. We're expecting more snow today and tomorrow, which I love. I love snow. I needed to get out this morning before the crowds and get my favorite Dark Canyon coffee and some groceries. I didn't have any bulk pinto beans like I thought I did, so I got a pretty good price on this bag. And I'm also ready to skim the fat off of this beef broth that I simmered yesterday and get it canned. And then after that, if I have the energy, I will can some of the pinto beans as well. I love that my 8-quart pan gives me exactly 4 quarts. After I put my vegetable and meat scraps in and fill it up to the top with water, I have just a tiny bit left, so I did not have to dilute any of my 4 quarts that are going into the canner. I've put the hot liquid into each jar, wiped the rim with vinegar and a paper towel, and I'm putting the lids on finger tight and getting them into my canner, and they will process for 25 minutes. Once those are done, I'm going to get my dry pinto beans ready to can, and I am not going to soak them ahead of time. I absolutely love my digital pressure canner, and yes, I'm an engineer, and yes, I believe in the technology, and I am not a purist. I have regular pressure canners as well, but this one is easy to use, and I'll use it over the others most of the time. And there we have our 4 beautiful jars of broth. Now I need to get these cooling for 12 hours. Got a precarious run over here. I've got a towel set out on my marble fireplace hearth to cool those. Let me get these out of here, and then we're going to start a whole nother batch for our beans. I've also got quite a few pint-sized jars empty after using a bunch of my home canned produce over the winter, so I can fit 7 of those regular mouth pint jars in my canner. So I've got those heating up while I get some dried beans ready to put in them. Each jar is going to get a heaping half cup of dried beans. These are pinto beans that I got in a huge bag at Safeway. I'm just going to spread them out and see if there are any pebbles or anything I want to toss out. Then those are going to go into those jars once they're warmed up and get topped off with some hot water, boiling water, and pressure canned for 75 minutes. I've got a second jar's worth of dried pinto beans out. I'm going to rinse each one before I put it into the jar. They're just dry though. And I'm also going to can some of my homegrown beans. This is a mixture of black beans, Mexican reds, black-eyed peas. What is that one? I can't remember what they all are. And this is painted pony beans that I grew. I'm going to can that jar. Plus, I've also got this cute weck jar of, I think these are Good Mother Stallard beans that I grew in the garden. So I will do a jar or two of these. The rest of this sack of beans will go into my dry storage down in the root cellar, where I keep corn and beans and everything in Mylar bags in 5-gallon buckets with oxygen absorbers, and those will keep for a long, long time. And anytime I have empty jars, I will continue to just can more beans. It's going to be August and September before I want to start filling them up with my homegrown produce, so there's no sense in leaving empty jars down there when I could be canning beans. I rinsed the beans real quick, threw them in the hot jar that came out of the canner. Now I'm going to add about a half a teaspoon of salt. I'm not even using canning salt. I don't care if these beans get cloudy, because they will anyway. I need to add hot water up to 1 inch of headspace and use my debubbler to make sure all the air bubbles are out from the voids between the beans. Wipe the rim of the jar. Put the only lid that I trust anymore on top, which is a 4 jars lid. I'll include a link for those in the description box. And then a ring, finger tight. And this jar, oh, let me double check the level. 1 inch headspace. Yep. So this goes into the canner. I changed my mind on canning the painted pony beans because I don't have a heaping half cup. I also don't have a heaping half cup of these mixed beans, but since they're already a mixed bean, I'm going to can those and just add some of these to our mixed beans until it's a heaping half cup. Pour it out here and look to see if I need to get any particles out. I think those are just beautiful. So I'll rinse these and get them put into a jar with some salt and boiling water. That's 3 jars of homegrown beans and 4 jars of bulk purchased pinto beans going in dry with boiling water and a half a teaspoon of salt in each pint jar. I'm going to can these for 75 minutes. Now, March is National Freezer Month or something like that, but I prefer not to have food in my freezer because if you've ever lost a freezer full of food like I have, it's expensive. Your insurance may cover it, but what a heartbreak to lose food that you have grown, harvested, vacuum sealed, frozen, hunted, fished. It's just not cool. So I'd rather get the stuff out of my freezer and into a shelf-stable jar, which is what this did, using up all of those vegetable and meat scraps that I keep in that gallon bag in the freezer until it's full. So I have more room in my freezer now, and I know that I didn't lose all of those scraps because it's now shelf-stable beef broth. Canner just went off from that load of beans. Let's have a look. We put dry beans in with hot liquid and a little salt, and look at how they have ended up filling out the jars. So let me take these over to our cooling area on a towel on top of my marble wood stove hearth. Those are going to sit for 12 hours undisturbed, no more than 24, to cool before I move them, and I'll label them at that time as well. That's exciting. They will be easy to cook with. They're ready to go. Don't need to be soaked. It's the next day and my beans are cooled. I took the rings off, all of them sealed, thanks to 4 jars, the only lid I will ever use again. And I've got 7 jars of beans, some from the garden, some bulk purchased, and 4 quarts of beef broth from scraps that I kept in the freezer. using up those empty jars until garden season produces more to fill them up again.